Up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's
your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
And just like that, the Watching Comics have appeared again. Jake, how are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you tonight, Mitch?
You know what? It's not too bad. It's a Thursday night. It was warm today. Actually, got to take my daughter out on a walk. We didn't have crappy weather. For those of you that may be new listeners of this podcast, Jake and I both live in Nebraska, and apparently that means winter can last like 12 months if it wants to. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what sort of animal has to see its shadow for this kind of thing to happen, but it's been a winter here, man.
It's been gnarly. We had winter, and more winter, and then another winter, and like 12 hours of spring, and then another diet winter, and now today we are like full blown into like heat.
I should have said Sasquatch. I should have said something about a Sasquatch seeing its shadow.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's just rewind that back. Let's rewind that back. Jake, what's your favorite animal that you think could survive the random frozen tundra of Nebraska?
Sasquatch.
Hey, that's cool.
It's the magic of the internet. We can rewind anything.
I love it. Okay.
I don't think that's how editing works.
We'll find out. Jake, I am editing this episode, and you won't find out until you hear it live on the internet if I kept this segment in.
I'm thrilled. The anticipation, I mean, everybody thinks that they're the only ones looking forward to this, but I listen along with everyone else.
That's right. It's not a narcissistic thing. We listen because we like the way we sound, but we also just want to critique ourselves too.
A little column A, a little column B.
Yeah, there you go. It's evening out. So anyway, if this is your first time listening to the Watching Comics podcast, welcome. We're glad you're here. If this is not your first time listening to the Watching Comics podcast, welcome back. We're glad you're here. Jake, why don't you give like a quick little 15-second rundown on what we do and what we're going to talk about tonight?
Well, this is the premier place to go and get your connection between comics and movies or comics and television. We're in a beautiful, wonderful time to be a nerd, and we're trying to just live in that crossover space. And tonight, we are going to try and right some serious wrongs here. Mitch, you're more the DC guy than I am, but I got to be honest, there's some characters over there on that side of the divide that I just freaking love. And I don't feel like some of them have been done right in the films. So tonight, we're going to talk about the DC Extended Universe, the DCEU, and where it's going. It's kind of in disarray or in reset mode right now. And Mitch and I decided we're going to hash this thing out. We're going to solve some problems. Cut this thing, edit it, get it clean and ready to go, send it off to Jeff Johns and get some movies made.
Boom. That's exactly how it's going to happen. We're going to fix Warner Brothers and the Hollywood portion of the DC cinematic world. That's why we're here. That's why you're listening to us. We're here providing this service. Hopefully the world is a better place at the end of this episode. But
I think it's guaranteed to be.
Well, there it is. I'm down with that confidence. Let's do it. So I'm a lifelong Superman fanboy, and I definitely subscribe to DC way more on that side than kind of in the same light that you are typically more of a Marvel standby. But at the same time, you are very well versed in most of mainstream comic lore, so I feel like you still have some good stuff to weigh in on here. But ultimately, we've got a giant schism, it seems like, between a few moments of brilliance and a few moments of muddled mess, and the where do we go from here, because Jeff Johns is running this show now. He's new as the Warner Brothers DCEU runner of everything, and we are coming off of the heels of Wonder Woman, which was by almost all measures, even if you think the film has some sort of flaw in it, Wonder Woman was a massive success, both in the box office and just cinematically speaking. That seemed to be a glimpse into the DCEU kind of finding its footing and doing something the right way with the right people. And then 6 months later, we got the Justice League movie, which was a muddled mess, even though there's a lot of me that liked it, but it was mainly a muddled mess because Zack Snyder had to bow out due to family reasons halfway through filming, and Joss Whedon came up and just shot the whole place up, and not in a good way. It was bad. So we're kind of at this crossroads now where we've got a new head of the division at Warner Brothers. We know what success looks like with a monumental achievement with Wonder Woman, and we've got this long list of upcoming projects that are both obscure but exciting and carry potential, and are featuring some newer directors that aren't named Zack Snyder, which is probably good news for a lot of people listening. So that's kind of where we're at. So Jake, how about you just kind of break down for me, maybe give me your high point and your low points of the DCEU so far. Let's start there. Tell me, let's just kind of riff a little bit on what already exists and what we need to build from.
So really, it's a tough question because I really want to be fair to these movies that I think some of them get trashed more than they deserve. But I also... Except
for Fantastic Four. I mean, just those movies can be trashed all the time. But
well, and of course,
that's
always
comic book movie speaking, not just DC. But
Yeah,
anyway.
Well, and of course, always Spider-Man 3 is the low point. I mean, that's our bar.
I tweeted on our Watching Comics Twitter the other day the official Watching Comics rankings of Spider-Man movies, and I rated, like all of them except for Spider-Man 3, and then I said 50 feet of crap, and then Spider-Man 3.
I actually saw that one, and I agree. I mean, didn't we, like, the first time we ever recorded, we said out of 8 Spider-Man movies, that one's number 9.
Exactly.
I can always give 30 seconds to trash that film. I think that you'd have to be an idiot to not say that the high point is Wonder Woman. And I've been on the record that, boy, I set a bar there. I hope you're not going to disagree now that I just threw the word idiot out there. I think that most people would agree. Ooh, hyperbolous. I think most people would agree that Wonder Woman's the high point. And I've been pretty vocal that I have some problems with the third act of that movie, where I think it got a little more credit than it deserved, just because we were so thrilled that it wasn't a giant turd. But all that being said, it's a good movie, and it's well made, and it's fun to watch, and it's very watchable. It's just, I can say a lot of good things about it. So I think Wonder Woman's definitely the high point. The low point is harder for me, but I have to say it's probably, and I hate this because I love him as an actor, but it's probably Jared Leto's Joker in Suicide Squad is really low point for me.
That movie was so bad.
Yeah.
Oh, Jake, it was awful. That may be one of the worst expensive movies I've seen, not named Spider-Man 3.
Well, and isn't it confusing? Like, I think Suicide Squad illustrates in a lot of ways what has been the struggle for the DCEU. Because to give a quick spy into the world of comics for people that don't read them, the current weird dichotomy in comic books is that Marvel is making these movies that are just universally beloved and defining a genre, but they can't get their comics right. Whereas DC is kind of stumbling around in the dark with the films, but their comic book line might be the best it's ever been right now. And
they've definitely got a longer, I would say, maybe I'm biased, but I would say the comic line of DC also has a longer, more prestigious line of big name writers writing some of the most meaningful arcs for popular characters.
Yeah, DC's been a lot smarter in how they've handled their creators. And DC has...
And currently for comics, like Marvel, I think the biggest problem with Marvel is, and you've alluded to this before, is they've been doing a lot of starting and stopping and rebooting, and now they're trying to pivot everything to match up with the movies. And so it's kind of like I think it's just a difference of which one are you listing as your true north. Marvel has obviously decided that the Avengers movie world is their bread and butter, and that needs to be the true north, the guiding light that takes everyone home, so everything needs to fall into line there. Whereas DC is still trying to figure out, like, okay, we've got the greatest comics history in the history of the art form. How in the world do we materialize that into prestige movie making?
I think that's a really good way of putting it. And I think that, so To me, Suicide Squad illustrates this issue where DC, they just haven't pinned down an identity with their films, because Suicide Squad, when we first see it, it's got that dark, gritty, like it's almost just a continuation of the Christopher Nolan films kind of thing going. And then it's like Guardians of the Galaxy hits and makes all this money. And I can just see somebody at Warner Brothers calls someone else and is like, hey, that thing with the raccoon made a lot of money. Can we do one of those? And so they're like, yeah, put a Queen song in that movie with Will Smith. And so suddenly the next trailer has got these bright, vibrant colors and lots of gags and classic rock songs. And it just felt so much like they couldn't pin a tone down. And I just think DC, there's like, it almost feels like the films have been winging it. Do you agree with that, or am I off base there?
I completely agree. I would say that the initial teaser trailer for Suicide Squad that you had first mentioned, with the gritty remake, a haunting remake of that song, I Started a Joke, was like in the conversation for the best trailer of the year. That trailer was phenomenal. It went viral on a level that was even humongous for a movie trailer standards. Like it was absolutely incredible. And I cannot overstate how much of a drastic pivot away from that tone everything else was after that moment. And that's not a good thing. It was staggering. And I think that's a big piece. And then I would say the other big piece is, and this we won't know how they handle this other piece until the next set of movies comes out. But I think DCEU were the last ones to fall victim, or they were the last ones to realize that the supernatural, overly fantastical, to a point where it's almost comical, third act battle sequence where you have to have something larger than life and something almost like ethereal. Like DC were like the last ones to realize, like, you know what, that's not really the way to go anymore. We need to put our big boy pants on and do something a little bit more visceral and authentic, ironically. And because Suicide Squad had that same problem where the villain was the supernatural character that had these incredible powers that could literally do anything that she practically wanted to, but she spent the whole time building another weapon that she didn't need. And then there was just this cosmic explosion. And Wonder Woman, whether you love the movie or not, I personally loved the film and even argued for it to be nominated for Best Picture. I can at least agree that the final climactic fight scene in the tail end of the third act was just a bit much, because it's just like, it's so it was like the same discovery we made 3.5 years prior with Age of Ultron, when we're just like, this isn't working anymore. And the problem is DC was still trying to make it work for those last few movies. And Batman versus Superman, say what you want about that movie. I think that movie is a B+, maybe an A- movie. But even still, the Doomsday thing still kind of crossed over, just with the way they shot it and the way they did those special effects and everything, still was kind of flirting with that third act. We're going over the top just a bit too much. Man of Steel, the utter destruction of Metropolis was just borderline grotesque, you know? So it's like, okay, we're done with those. DC hopefully has finally gotten the message that that's not really the MO anymore of what really ties up a good third act. So I think that, along with the tonal differences, has just really created a massive disconnect. And we call it the DCEU, but it doesn't feel like much is linked beyond Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Like Green Lantern could have easily been brought into the DCEU, but that movie was so awful that they just decided to cut that off as fat that needed to be trimmed. You know, so it's like there's just so much disconnect and so much singularity. It feels like that it's like, the next 2 years with the projects that are coming up is going to make or break what's coming down the line and what we see overall as the big DCEU.
Yeah, I think you're right on. And so I guess for me, the question is, you know, because everyone else ad nauseum has discussed what was not working for them about the DCEU. So we're at this point. And you mentioned it earlier, Jeff Johns, who, for those who don't know, Jeff Johns has a history as a great writer of comic books. spent his career just going around to properties that people thought were dead in the water and saying, no, let me go ahead and make this a bestseller. Completely redefined several classic characters, like Green Lantern is the biggest one. And Jeff Johns is now in charge. He basically is steering the whole overall arc of DC Comics. And now he's been given a similar role in the DCEU. And it's going to be very fascinating to see if that storytelling ability, because really what he did, he course corrected the entire DC Comics line. The whole thing was a mess 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's, like I said, probably the best it's ever been. And it's going to be really fascinating to see if he can translate that storytelling ability in comics medium to running the show with film. But what I want to kind of discuss is what, Mitch, and I really want your opinion on this. Where do you want to see them go with this? Do you like what we know is still coming? So we know Aquaman is next, right?
Okay, and so then we've got as far as just playing off of the Justice League. Okay, so clearly the Justice League is a key focal point of the DCEU. So we're going to call that the main pillar for now. All right, so the main pillar is Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, Wonder Woman, and Justice League is what we've got so far. The immediate next ones as far as the main pillar is concerned are Aquaman, which is end of this year, and then Wonder Woman 2, which is early fall of next year, and Flashpoint, which is the Flash standalone, which is probably going to be the next year and a half. That's what we're looking. And then Man of Steel 2, good Lord knows if they're ever going to get that one under production or not. The script is ready, but they just haven't moved forward on that. But hopefully that will happen within the next 2 years too. So that's where we're headed with kind of like those heavy hitters.
Is Shazam in there still?
Shazam is coming. Shazam should be arriving in spring of next year, maybe March or April. And gotcha. I am very encouraged by Shazam, but we don't know how much that's going to bleed into the Justice League lore yet.
Yeah.
And so what I'm interested to see is what they're going to do with, like, are they going to have things, because like Shazam is happening, Batgirl is happening, Birds of Prey and Suicide Squad 2 are happening. So I'm interested to see if they're going to take a note out of the MCU book and do something like maybe like Ant-Man, where Ant-Man is clearly like strong enough to stand on his own, but he's not exactly an Avenger either. And he was in Civil War for all of 5 minutes, but was not in Infinity War. You know what I mean? So it's like he belongs, but he doesn't belong, but no one's really complaining, but the standalone is fine too. I don't know if, things like Shazam and Batgirl are going to be along those lines or not. And I guess it'll just depend on what they decide to do with Justice League going forward. I have not heard or read much scuttlebutt on a Justice League 2 yet. And I think it's mainly because they got to get these other things, like Aquaman Singular's got to get done, Flash Singular's got to get done, Wonder Woman sequel's got to get done, and the Batman's got to get done too. So it's like Justice League 2 isn't even in the queue yet. So if we're talking DCEU evolution, we are at a tipping point, and I think they are being strategic in not really overly forecasting anything beyond 2019, which is probably smart. And we may just have to take a look at the box office and some of the reviews and some of the lasting power of some of these films to see if they're going to try to do Justice League like they do the Avengers, or if they're just going to let some of these singular characters lie. I don't know, but the next 2 years are going to be really telling, and we're kind of venturing into this next chapter without much of an end path.
Well, and a few of the things that you mentioned in there touch on another point of this whole idea that there's not a lot of plan. There's also there's going to be these films that don't fit into the DCEU, but do use some of the characters, like a Joker origin story. Mm-hmm. There's talk about that. There's the Justice League Dark, which honestly actually sounds kind of fun. But I mean, we could give like a 3-part episode to all the problems surrounding and rumored to be surrounding the Batman. But
oh my gosh! And a new report came, or at least rumor came out this week that Ben Affleck may be changing his mind and staying on too. And it's like, dude, just figure it out.
Yeah, seriously, poop or get off the pot, Ben. You know, like the time is now. Do something here.
I will say that. I forgot to mention another one. Green Lantern Corps is listed as in development, but there's no TBAs or showrunners or writers or anything announced yet. So it's that may be the farthest out we've gone. Our Green Lantern Corps and Nightwing and Joker Origin, which are all kind of in the queue, but they're listed as TBA, and they don't and that means it's beyond 2020 as far as this is concerned. That's probably as far as we can go. I think the most conclusive in the near future we can make is Batgirl, which has Christina Hodson writing a script, and will probably be directly linked to the Justice League, and it's probably going to be released in the next 2 to 2.5 years. That's probably the most far out concrete we can get.
Yeah, and your guy Joss dropped out of that one.
Yeah, because he realized he shouldn't be playing around with nice things because he just ruins them. Friggin' Joss. He's like, I looked at Batgirl for 18 months and I just realized there wasn't a story there, so I better drop out. And then Christina Hodson, who's been literally writing the arc of the comics for the last few years and has an amazing internet following and has incredible credentials of writing in all sorts of kinds of different mediums. She throws out a Twitter saying like, hey, why don't you hire me, the woman who's been doing it already? And then finally Warner Brothers was like, oh, you know what? That's not a bad idea. So thank goodness. Oh my friggin' Lord. Christina's saving the day for all of us. Because I think Batgirl could be legitimately amazing. I'm really excited specifically for Batgirl and for Birds of Prey. Because if nothing else, we can say Wonder Woman blew the doors down for being the first one to really give us a pioneering type of comic book experience as far as social commentary is concerned. Now, obviously, Black Panther was humongous, and I don't want to negate that because I think it's probably the best Marvel movie made. But at the same time, Wonder Woman did very much the same thing that Black Panther did, but for feminism. And DCEU seems to be leaning into that, which is awesome because DC's got incredible female-led characters. So we've got Birds of Prey, which is coming in the next few years, which is going to be the Harley Quinn Girl Squad movie, and Margot Robbie is producing it, and Christina Hodson is writing the script, and it's being directed by another woman named Kathy Yan. So that's going to be legit. And then Batgirl, same thing. That's going to be female-charged, incredible character written by the woman that's writing the best arc and all of that. So I think there's going to be a good momentum leaning into that too. So like that may be a separate path, but I'm just super jazzed to see where that goes because these sorts of things matter. And we've kind of alluded to this before too, is the concept of like one of the reasons why comic books are so great is because it allows us to both live in a world that doesn't exist, but also allow us to imagine what a world would look like if certain things did exist that are very, very tangible.
Yeah. And so I guess for me, there's so much that is on that list as potentially happening, probably happening, might not happen, but let's still keep it on the list. And I think that for me, I guess the question for me is, do you hit the reset button on the DCEU since critics and audiences don't necessarily seem to be responding? Do you press ahead with what was in place? Do you tweak it a little? Where do they go from here? Because let's assume that the goal is to make something like what Marvel has. Mm-hmm. And I think it's safe to assume that. It's what everybody wants. What do they do to get there? What do you think?
I think they've prescribed the formula, at least for 2018 and 2019, which is take a note from the Marvel book. And if you really want to establish something that builds the fandom while also pleases the already existing fandom and knows how to adequately ramp up to key tipping points, I think the key is making high quality singular character movies, especially about secondary characters that we may not necessarily be attached to. We talked about this with Infinity War, with like Captain America and Iron Man were, I mean, best case scenario, like coach class or maybe business class flight attendees of the Marvel comic book universe. And then the movies launched them into the Hall of Fame stratosphere because Iron Man 1 was phenomenal. The first two Captain Americas were phenomenal, and Iron Man 2 and 3 made so much money in the box office. So it's like all of a sudden we cared about these people because Marvel made us care about them for the right reasons. And then that led to the organic building of all the other things that led to Avengers. And so it just seemed like the natural progression. So DC's doing that. We've got Aquaman at the end of the year. And I think what they did with Aquaman and Justice League was phenomenal. They took a character that is normally forgotten about because he's not that flashy and he's not very, I guess, like raw in any way. He's just kind of a pansy in some of the stereotypical senses. And they flipped that. And I think they did it appropriately. I think they did it really well. And everything that I've seen about the upcoming movie follows that light in a way that doesn't overdo it. And so I think Aquaman has the potential to establish him as a main player in the same light that Marvel did. Shazam is the same thing. Shazam went through a run for decades where he was the go-to comic book hero, but we haven't seen that in like 30 plus years. This is going to be an education and a reintroduction to a great deal of people. And they have some really good talent behind this film and in some of the roles of this film. Like Mark Strong especially is just a phenomenal actor. So I think Shazam could be doing that as well. Wonder Woman 2, Patty Jenkins is back doing the same thing she knows how to do, and Kristen Wiig is playing the villain to play Cheetah. So that's just going to be balls awesome. That takes us to mid to 2019. So then by then we will already be hopefully lauding those three movies, and then we'll be primed and ready for Batgirl and Flash. And so if those are done well, then it's like all of a sudden we have our Iron Man and Captain America, for lack of a better reference point for DCEU. We've got these characters that we weren't excited about beforehand. Now we are emotionally invested. Now we are excited. And it seems a little bit more tangible and a little bit more what the fans want, to build something that's a little bit larger there. And I think the first Justice League movie, in addition to the Zack Snyder, Joss Whedon thing, just we may not have established enough of that emotional buy-in to some of the secondary characters in order to earn that movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna take your idea and run with it for a second, and I'm gonna speak some potential blasphemy. But I think, and I say this as someone who I feel that The Dark Knight is among the best movies I've ever seen. And I think that we owe so much of current pop culture to the Donner Superman films. I think we've seen enough Batman and Superman for a little while. I'm not saying forever. But I actually think that those two roles are very, very well cast right now. I'm a big Batfleck fan, and I didn't think I was going to be.
I think the key was that they made Batfleck Frank Miller Batman. Like I don't trust Batfleck as like just the generic overall, just put him in a Batman era and make it work. He is specific for this one. The approaching middle age, the salt and pepper hair, the overly buff, the anger issues, that sort of thing. I think he fits that really well. Anyway, keep going.
Well, no, and so I mean, yeah, after the Daredevil movie, I was so ready to hate him in Batman role, but I actually liked him. I think those roles are perfectly cast. But I think DC is in a unique position that Marvel is not right now, in that they control their entire catalog of characters. And I think what I would love to see is something along the lines of what you said. The other thing is, it took Marvel a long time to figure this out, and they only recently nailed it, that letting creators create and stop meddling so much as a studio. And we're not seeing DC do that right yet. And I think I would love to see DC use their clout as Warner Brothers and go in and pick out 3 or 4 or 5 filmmakers who have very unique visions that maybe do the Marvel thing and get, the unsung heroes like Taika Waititi, or Coogler, but just find a few people that they really believe in as filmmakers and ask them, who in our catalog of characters do you have a story for? And do what no one else right now has the guts to do. And that includes Marvel, because as great as Marvel has gotten lately at letting their creators create, there is still a little bit of that holdback where, no, we need this. And just let the creators create, let them go crazy and let them do some crazy stuff. Give me someone that I don't even know yet. Hand them the Green Lantern Corps and let them adapt the Sinestro Corps War by Jeff Johns and make it a brilliant space opera that is also a social commentary on the tension between freedom and safety. I'd go see that movie. Give me someone who understands father-son relationships and let them do a movie with the Flash about Barry Allen dying and handing it over to Wally West. Mostly just because I grew up in the 90s and I freaking miss Wally. But just let some creators go crazy, or let Guillermo del Toro make his freaking Justice League dark. That thing would be insane. Let him make Constantine, but just turn people loose. And then after 4 or 5 years of that, look at the state of the universe. Look at the giant stack of money that you're sitting on. And then say, what's the tone to all of this if we bring it together? Go get somebody who can tie it all together. Grab Henry and Ben and say, we're doing another Justice League movie. We've got to have Superman and Batman. Save your heavy hitters for the big, big movie. It should be a celebration and a big deal when Batman and Superman are on screen together. It shouldn't be just this year's version of it. That's my thought on it, and that's where I'd really love to see them go with this, is treat these characters like the legends that they are. Allude to them, hint at them, make it special.
I completely agree with you, and I think you have helped speak this into existence, because my estimation is that this is where they're going. Because I was about to say, as you started, I was like, he's going to make a point that we needed to make, which I'm glad you did. But basically all we have in DCEU for tone is Zack Snyder and Patty Jenkins. I'm ignoring David Ayer's Suicide Squad because that movie was just a heaping pile of junk. So that's basically all we've got is those two voices for 4 movies. So it's like we just need some variety there. But here we go. Aquaman, James Wan. He's got a filmography that's mostly producing, not as much directing, and it's mostly horror in his previous stuff. Shazam, we have David F. Sandberg, same type of thing. Very slim directing dossier so far, and the few titles he's done has been more of a thriller horror genre. Flashpoint is John Francis DeLay, who is mostly an actor and has only recently started to direct. So, like, those are some of the directors that are on the next set of and then Patty Jenkins is doing Wonder Woman 2, right? So I think we've got potential, because Marvel was very much this way. Not many people had heard of the Russo brothers before they got Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Mm-hmm. Not many people really knew the tone of Tika Waikiki. I can never say his name right. Not many people knew his approach and his tone and his trademark for making movies until he did Thor Ragnarok. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, mm-hmm. Jon Favreau even had not really directed too much until he did the first Iron Man. So this if you are picking the right people who have these artistic visions, and certainly we don't know that because we're not sitting in the production rooms, but if they're picking the right people, taking the right kind of risks, and they're giving them the right kind of free reins to go and do it, then that does seem to be a formula, as much as I hate boiling things down to a formula. But it's like that may be one of the only ways to bring freshness to it. And one thing that I appreciate too is, like, obviously DC wants to show that it's got deep pockets and it's flirting with Peter Jackson right now, and they have inked Steven Spielberg. But what I like is that if all the rumors are true about both of these projects, neither one of them are touching a Justice League type movie. Mm-hmm. And so it's also really interesting to see that they're not letting those types of people put their stamp on these overly familiar characters, which I think if they're following the MCU formula, that may be the right decision.
Yeah, and I think that, I guess I just feel like the creator driven is where they really need to go, because the other thing is, like, again, talking back to trying to tie the comics and the movies together. Under Jeff Johns' leadership, that's what the comics have done a better job of. They're not always spot on with that, but there's more of this understanding of what works, but they've also locked in some brilliant talent and really let them play with the mythology a little bit. And I'm hoping he's going to have the vision and the wisdom to do that on this level. I think for me, if I can be negative for a minute, what I don't want to see any more of is I think that Warner Brothers took the exact wrong lesson from the Christopher Nolan Batman films, because the lesson should have been, let creators create, because what you have there is Christopher Nolan reimagining Batman as this brilliant crime story. And it's really not even entirely a superhero film. It's in a lot of ways more
not a superhero. He's a vigilante.
This is true, as you remind us. But you're exactly right. Is Nolan understood that part of the character and took it and ran with it. But what Warner Brothers saw was, they got really dark and gritty, and people lined up to give us money. What if we wash out the color palette on a Superman film? And it's just like, they keep learning the wrong things. They went and saw Guardians of the Galaxy and like, if we put a Queen song in that Suicide Squad trailer, we'll get some more cash out of that. And I just want them to just pump the brakes. No more unnecessary darkness. No more. And some of it should be dark. Some of the DC universe is very dark. But John Constantine.
They've certainly seems, though, as they got stuck reversing the process. They were saying, we want to establish a story that will fit with a tone, but they need to start with a story and then say, find the tone that fits this.
Yes, nailed it. Could not be said better. So I won't keep trying. And I just want to see. I think that's it. Just get the process right. If the movie needs to be dark, if you're going to do a Hellblazer movie with John Constantine starring anyone but Keanu Reeves, please, Jesus, then that should be pretty freaking dark, But let's not do this thing where we just do darkness for its own sake and think that equates mature.
That's a great way to sum it up. And it's almost, because saying you're doing something different just for the sake of being different is not necessarily the correct way to do it. And I think I just never thought I would say this, just because I've never thought that there was much traction there. But I'm optimistic about Aquaman. I am 100% optimistic about Aquaman. And I am really looking forward to Shazam, because if Shazam is done right, which so far the reports of the production have been saying that it's great, and a lot of the footage that has leaked has looked really good as well. And again, I'm a fan of the cast. I'm really interested to see what Shazam does for the fan base that's not familiar with him, and maybe what he can do to bring some older fans back into the fold too. I think Shazam could be one of those tipping points that a lot of people are surprised by, but maybe we shouldn't be surprised by. And that could really amp up some of the momentum. Wonder Woman 2 just has to not suck, and it'll be fine. Because it'll be remarkable, because Patty Jenkins knows what she's doing, and Kristen Wiig cast as Cheetah is one of my favorite decisions of the last few years. So I'm worried about the Suicide Squad thing hanging out there. That movie was so bad. Now, they're not having David Ayer doing the second one, which is good, but there's gosh, it was such a mess. I would almost rather them just go with Birds of Prey and lay Suicide Squad to rest entirely. Like, just don't, just stop. All right, let's do. Can we just maybe just choose that it doesn't exist anymore and maybe just ignore it and it'll go away? Like, that's just what we need to do.
That's actually, I mean, that's pretty much an option, right? Because other than a Batman cameo, it really doesn't. I mean, you could probably just scrap that whole thing, keep the parts that they like, and just forget that the rest happened. I mean, heck,
I did that with the X-Men movies. We'll have to do an episode on that. I've mentioned this before. I call it Apocalypse Order, where I think I need to revisit it before we record, but I think we can cut out 3 whole X-Men movies and still get the rest and not have to suffer through junk.
Man, you're teasing me so much here because I almost asked you what the order is. I'm like, no, idiot. Then there won't be an episode to record. That would be a really good episode. Let's put that on the docket for some time in the future. I think that, and I'm going to say, actually, I don't even think I would recast the Joker, as bad of an interpretation as it is, but because I really love Jared Leto as an actor and I was really excited when he got the part. I just think we need a new vision for it. And I really don't think there's anything wrong with doing that character a way that it's already been done. I don't know that we have to necessarily completely reinvent the wheel every single time that the Joker's on screen. And I feel like that's maybe what went wrong there.
Can I ask the blasphemous question and say, do we need the Joker?
Oh, it's a great question because
we've got a pretty straw man, not very good interpretation of Joker on Gotham right now.
Ugh.
We had Joker in Suicide Squad. We had the abomination that was the Killing Joke animated movie a couple years ago, and that was after we already had The Dark Knight. So it's just it seems like we're hitting it over the head just a bit much with the it's like, okay, I get it. The Joker, I get it. He's on the Mount Rushmore of comic book villains. I get it. But there's more to do, and there's only so much we can do with one thing. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's no longer a hook if it stops being potent. Like, if it stops being effective.
Well, and Batman has the best villains in comics. And so, like, is the Joker the best of them? Yes. Does that mean that everybody else is freaking Stiltman? No, it means, like, you could do a heck of a story. There is a story out there with the Riddler that has yet to be told that would be brilliant. There's so much that could be done with so many villains. The Penguin could be revisited. Heck, you could get Harvey Dent in there again. Oh my gosh, give me a movie version of that episode from Batman the Animated Series with Mr. Freeze, where they took him from a joke of a character. Him. Oh my gosh, where he's just trying to save his wife. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, like, give me a film version of that.
Or give me Red Hood. Give me a live action version of Red Hood. Like,
seriously.
There's so much richness there. I just don't know why because that's the other thing too, is it also devalidates so much of the goodness too. It's like, man, I mean, like, okay, we all agree that Heath Ledger's Joker is like one of the seminal performances of the 21st century, but also trying to revisit that then after that, I feel like just spits in the face of that performance. Just as a movie critic, I just, like, it gets me so angry. I'm like, just stop it. Take a break. Go find someone else.
I would argue also that, with all respect to Jack Nicholson, and I would argue there's even been 2 defining Joker performances, and I'll go to Mark Hamill as the animated Joker.
Oh, I would put Mark Hamill over Jack Nicholson's for sure.
Oh, definitely. Well, yeah. I mean, I say respect just in case he's listening, because he's still scary.
Good old Jack.
Wow. Yeah. But I think it's Heath Ledger, Mark Hamill. Those are the 2 Jokers. I don't know that we need to keep Yeah, I'm with you. We don't need the Joker. And it's an awesome character. It's a phenomenal character. It is also a character that has been gotten wrong both on page and on screen
More than
far
he's
more
been gotten
times.
right.
Yes, there have been way more misses than hits with the Joker, and just because the hits are so good is not a reason to keep subjecting us to forehead tattoos.
And so maybe also this just comes back to your earlier point of maybe we're just Batmaned out for a while.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just it. Like, make that guy special, you know? And like, oh, okay. While we're casting or recasting or not casting villains, again, an actor I like, but I do need a different person playing Lex Luthor. And I mean, we've seen a million Lex Luthor movies you've said before on here, and I agree with that. But I love the character. I think he's one of the most fascinating villains in all of comics. But I need somebody who's not going to give me trust fund Joker. And Jesse Eisenberg is a talented actor. It's not a knock on him. I need somebody else in there that brings more to that role.
There's so much. I think what they haven't gotten right with Lex Luthor is they haven't touched on the intimidation factor and the sheer just the influential like billionaire type power type character. Because I think one of the best single comics I've ever read is the biography of Lex Luthor. And it's an absolutely incredible piece, and the whole thing is told from the point of view of a journalist who's trying to uncover a scoop on whether Lex Luthor really is this vindictive murderer or not, and his life gets caught in the balance. And it's done almost like you're watching a high quality prestige crime drama on Netflix, and it's done really, really well. And I'm like, and that only works because they're painting Luthor in this light of this, like almost in the same light as Kingpin. And there's just a lot more to that than there is to just, oh, I'm interested in real estate. Oh, I have a lot of money because my dad left it to me type of thing. So there's just a lot. So again, if they're going to do it, why don't they just go with one of the other 50 chapters they have of Luthor instead of the same one they keep revisiting? But what I'm excited about that is, if we don't have Batman or Superman, as much as that hurts me to say, because gosh, I love watching Superman. But if we don't have Batman and Superman for the next 2 years minimum, that will cleanse our palate a bit.
Yeah.
Because right now the Batman movie is listed as TBA, and the Man of Steel sequel has only been greenlit in theory. Right. So if none of them make appearances in any of those other movies, even if Batman makes a quick appearance in Suicide Squad 2, it won't be but for more than a couple of minutes. So it's like we'll have a 2-year palate cleanse to really just get a fresh look at, okay, what does the rest of DC have to offer me? And is Warner Brothers putting the right people behind these projects to get me interested?
Yeah. And I think also back to the villains thing, I mean, if you don't have Batman and Superman being used as much, you can go to so many other villains in the DC universe, and you can tap into so much more of their storytelling ability if you're not constantly retelling the story of Gotham's descent into anarchy, and if you're not constantly retelling the story of Superman challenging Lex Luthor's control over Metropolis. And you can get into, some of that galactic stuff with the Green Lantern Corps, and you can have Sinestro in there, and you can go into things like, man, give me the Rogues on screen with someone better than those guys from Prison Break, and give me the Rogues from The Flash and Captain Cold doing his code of honor where he's almost the hero and some people cheer for him over The Flash. Man, it would be good.
Mm-hmm. And that's, we need more variety and genuine conflict in the central stories, and we need new characters that we haven't been seeing on screen for a decade plus. I think, and that's an overly simplistic way of summing it up, but I think that's ultimately two of the biggest pieces that we're saying here. Is just like, we need something new, and we need a storyline that actually makes us believe that the conflict is earned and is real and is vital and is costing people something.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. Is And I guess this isn't what I came in ready to say tonight, but I think we've kind of convinced me at least that, a lot of the issue here is that we're trying to tell the same old stories, but with a new coat of paint. And maybe it's time to branch out a little and let's get creative and let's get weird and, let's take some swings and miss at a few things. Not every movie, everyone's got to make a Hulk or an Incredible Hulk or an Iron Man 2, let's try some stuff and see what comes of it.
For sure. And it's just going to be interesting the next 2 or 3 years on both sides of the DCEU and the MCU. They seem to be coming at us with a new horizon because obviously Avengers 4 is going to be the end of Captain America and Iron Man, respectively, we think. And DCEU here is going to give us 2 years without the two most iconic icons of their canon. So here, buckle up. The next 2 years are going to be adrenaline filled, and we're definitely going to have this genre filled with high quality stuff. But it is going to be new. And it is going to be different, and I'm hoping we're saying those in positive tones, not negative, at the end of it.
Can I make a shout out to the character that I would most want to see is Booster Gold.
Booster Gold, get some.
Right. Like get Booster Gold in there. And do you like the internet's favorite guy for that role is Nathan Fillion? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not drinking the Nathan Fillion Kool-Aid. I never have been, but we've talked about this before about how I seem to be the only person in the world that thought Firefly was overrated. Mm-hmm. So, he just doesn't say yes to good stuff. Maybe that's part of it. I haven't seen him in a role where he could really wow me because most of the writing he says yes to is pretty janky. So I'm willing to concede to the fact that Nathan Fillion could wow me if he's got a script that's worthwhile. But in the meantime, not wild about it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that I personally like Nathan Fillion a lot. I'd like him in that role. I also generally assume
now, right?
See, and that's part of it. The other thing is that I generally assume the internet's wrong most of the time, like when they want something. And so when the internet's all like, we need this person in the role, I'm like, what am I not seeing here that could go wrong? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be hopeful about in the DC universe. I think that there are some signs of life there, and there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. I think for me, the last big point I want to make is that the biggest mistake made in Justice League to me was putting Steppenwolf in as the villain. Because frankly, you have the greatest villain, like up there with Doctor Doom for me, for greatest villains in comics in Darkseid, and didn't use him. And I get wanting to allude to him and wanting to build the suspense, but man, this was not the time to go low on spectacle, the Justice League film. I needed some Darkseid in there, and I want to see it.
Steppenwolf was a miss. It was a big, big whiff. And I will say that it is clear that they were paving the way to Darkseid. The problem is because Justice League was such a struggle and it box office did not return what it needed to, we have a big fat question mark at the end of this. And if the precipice of 2020 arrives and we still do not have a forecast of when potentially JL2 could arrive, then we start going down that potential rabbit hole of saying like, well, then does that mean Darkseid never happens? And then I really get pissed off.
Yeah, because I can't live in a world where I got a cinematic version of Darkseid's uncle before I got him and didn't get him.
Yeah, it's like, it's a swing and a miss. That portion was a swing and a miss, man. God. I just don't get it. Okay, well, I in many ways we probably ended where we began, which is there's a lot of meh, there is some and then there's a whole bunch of hope, and that's about where we're at with DCEU.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty effectively. I mean, I want it to be good. I think that the world is a better place when both DC and Marvel are on their game. As Marvel calls them, the distinguished competition. I want to see those two things be great, not just one, and not one chasing the other. And it hurts me in my soul to see DC so blatantly trying to copy Marvel sometimes. And I know they've both copied each other for the last 70 years. I get it, but I just want to see this be great. So, man, I'm rooting for you, Jeff.
Get it, Jeff. Make some gold. Make us all proud. Make us all happy. That's what we want. But ultimately, you're going to get our money anyway, because even if they suck, we're going to go see it.
That's true.
So check us out on watchingcomics.com or on Twitter at WatchComicsPod. That's comics with an X. Or on Instagram at WatchingComics. And next week, Jake, as they probably can guess, tell them all what we're doing next week.
We're going to take a step back in time and take a look at the original Superman film. No, we're going to look at Deadpool 2, obviously. And I get to see this one on opening night, finally.
Yay! Jake, you're joining the rest of us.
Yay, yeah. I've got this bad habit of not looking ahead at film releases when I make my schedule. So normally I'm doing something when a movie I want to see comes out, but not this time. Tomorrow night, I'm going to go see Deadpool.
Give us a rate and a review on iTunes. It allows us to be found by more people and get some more listeners. And it's also just a nice thing to do because you're our friends. So there's that.